just want to give you a picture of the artist's conception of what Shlomo's palace or compound looked like. And here's his buildings with all the rooms, and here is the Ulam HaKisei, Ulam HaMishpat, and the Beis Yar HaLavonon, and then here was his house. So we had the Hall of the Throne, the Hall of Justice, his forest where he could walk around and catch his breath and sort of feel like he's returned to nature. And then there was all of the chambers of his home, and there was a wall around it, and this was Shlomo's palace. Everybody see that? Anybody want me to pass it back? All right, anyway, that's it. Okay. Now we finished discussing his palace. And as I told you before, I think it's all part of one big major building project, because now we're going to go back to the Beis Hamikdash. Pasuk Yud Gimel, Vayishlach HaMelech Shlomo, Vayikach Eschiro Mitzor, and King Solomon sends to bring before him a gentleman whose name is Hiram from the city of Sidon. Ben Isha Almanoi was the son of a widow, Mimate Naphtali, from the tribe of Naphtali. Va'obev Yisori, his father went to live in Sidon, because he was learned there to be Chorish Nechoshes, to be a carver of copper, or worked with copper or brass. And there in Sidon, he learned and studied, and he accumulated all of wisdom and understanding and knowledge in order to do work with copper. Vayovo el Hamelach Shlomo, and after Shlomo summons him, he came to Shlomo Vayasas Kol Malachto, and there he began to work for King Shlomo. Vayotzar Shneho Amudim Nechoshes, and he made two great columns, which were going to be at the entrance to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Ulam, to the chambers. Vayotzar Shnei Hamudim Nechoshes, he made them out of copper. Shmona Esrei Amma, they were 18 cubits high, which is 27 feet high, roughly. Komas HaMura, that's how tall one of the columns was. V'chut shtei mesrei amo yosobes ha'amo, and if you took a string and you went around the circumference of the amud, it would take 12 amos, in other words 18 feet, to go around the circumference of this 27-foot high amud. But that's not the end of the amud, because there's going to be a crown on top of the amud. Yosovet HaMurasheni, and the same, they were both equal in size, the two columns. Ushnei Katorot, and there were two crowns on top of these, each one had its own crown. Also he made La'aseis al Roshei HaMudim, to place them on top of the columns. Mutzak Nechoshes, they were poured pure copper. So a difference of opinion, what is Nechoshes, copper or brass? Very, very similar metals. Anyway, Chamesh Amos Komas HaKoteres HaEchad. The crowns were 5 amos tall, 7 feet tall. The Chamesh Amos Komas HaKoteres HaSheni, and the second one was of equal height, also 5 amos, which is roughly 7 feet. Okay, so you had a 15 amma height, and you had another 5 amos on top of that as a koteret, 20 amos high, which is approximately 30-something feet high. Svachim masei svacha. Now around these, top of this amud was like lattice work, crisscrossed lattice work. Masei svacha, gedilim with wreaths hanging from the lattice work. The lattice work was made out of copper. Yedila Masei Sharsharos, There were wreaths were made like chains that hung around the amud. Shiva lakoteres oechos, 7 of these strands around the top of the first amud, v'shiva lakoteres hashenis, and 7 around the second one. Let me just see if there's any pictures of how this was made. I'm sure there were. Okay, hold it. Let's go back, see. I have to keep going back and forth. Oh, here it is. Here's a picture of the artist's conception of the koteret, this crown. You see the crown there? And here it is on top of the amud. Okay. Okay. And then he made the columns and he put the crowns on top of them. He made this little, whatever you want to call it, on top of the crown, which was also above the. You see the, I don't know if you can follow that, but there is the chains that went around, and he had flowers and trees and all kinds of things carved into the koteret, into the crown. Okay, and then they had this little, what I showed you before, on top of the crown. Okay. And so he did for the second crown. The 2 crowns were basically the same thing, exactly duplicate copies of each other. And the koteres, which was on the amudim, oh, thank you. Watch me spill it now.
No.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you got more water upstairs?
No.
Take it from the faucet here.
No, they have upstairs.
Take it from the faucet.
Water, more. Okay. Bikosaros, and there was this top crown. Above the belly of the crown. Here's the belly of the crown, and on top of it was this border of whatever he calls it. I don't know exactly what it is. It's some kind of flowery finish. And there was hundreds of these pomegranates and flowers and on this crown all the way around, because it was had quite a distance around it, 15 feet around it. Okay, and there were 200 of these pomegranates carved into the crown around this amud. Vayokem es ha'amudim, and he placed, he set up these amudim, these columns, ulam, at the entranceway to the Beis Hamikdash. Now it was 120 almost high. Here are the amudim by the entranceway into the sanctuary, into the hall. Okay, so first he put up the right column, and he called the name of the first column on the right Yochin, established, fixed. And the second column that he established at this entranceway to the Heichal, the Ulam, he called it Boaz. Yochin means now I'm fixing this temple, I'm fixing it, I'm setting it up, I'm establishing it, I'm making it sort of concretized. And the second column he called Boaz, in it is strength. Rosho Amudim Maisa Shoshan, and on the top he made like roses, the flowers. Vatitom Meleches Hamudim, and that was the end of that's a description of how he made the Amudim. Now he made a yam. The yam was a gigantic mikveh. Here's the final looking of this yam. The final depiction of this yam. If you take a look in the, I didn't bring it this week, but in the Machon HaMikdash, the Temple Institute in the Old City, they have a beautiful color depiction of the yam, which is basically the sea, the gigantic mikveh that was in the temple courtyard. This is it. It was, you will see soon, there were 12 oxen, 4 sides basically, 3 on each side, total of 12 in the circumference, with each one, their heads or their mouths were pointing outward, and here was the big vat, or we might call bowl, that was on top, that was the mikveh where they put the water.
Was it used?
Yeah, sure it was used.
Where's the?
Where is it?
No. Where is the? How do you get up there?
Oh, they had to have a ladder of some sort.
I don't see any kind of a staircase.
I know. I always wondered about it myself. That's a very good question. But they must have had something to get up in there.
Maybe it talks about that further down in this.
No, there's no mention of how they got into it. But it's a good question. That question always bothered me. They must have had some kind of movable ladder. They had a helicopter. They had a lot of movable things here. We will see they had a little, were for Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, where the Kohanim washed their hands and feet, not their whole bodies, just hands and feet. They had these movable things, which in the English translation they call setters, and they had little bowls on top of wagons that had wheels, and we will learn about them soon. And they moved them around the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash so that the Kohanim would be able to cleanse, purify their hands and feet when they didn't have to immerse completely into the mikveh. So they had these movable things. They must have had some kind of movable ladder or movable staircase on wheels of some sort, but they never depict it. But it had to be, because you can't just, there was no diving board, you know what I mean? Okay. Vayasas hayam mutzak. He made the sea, this big bowl, let's call it, a mutzak of poured copper. Eser ba'amo misvoso ad svoso. 10 amos. It had a diameter of 10 amos from one lip to the other lip. Ogol. It was circular. Saviv. Chamesh ba'amo komoso. It was 5 amos tall, say 7 feet tall, the bowl. And it was 10 amos, which is 15 feet from one lip to the other lip. Completely round, and 5 amos tall. Rikav. Shloshim bo'amo yosovo sosaviv. And if you took a string or a line and you stretched it around this sea, this gigantic bowl, it would go 30 amos around. Okay, for those of you who are very proficient in geometry, you will see that I figured this out many years ago when I was closer to my high school math, when I remembered a little bit of the geometry. I'll tell you the truth, I haven't since calculated it. But based on pi r square or whatever, you can figure out the circumference. And this is a estimate. Throughout the Talmud and whatever, in the Torah, wherever there's a calculation, they apparently knew pi r square, but they rounded it off. They didn't go to the fine decimals, 3.14 or something like that. They didn't bother with the 1/4.
Goes to infinity.
Yeah, I don't even know. They just didn't bother with that. They just estimate. It was a guesstimate. Not even a guesstimate. It was a round off. They rounded it off. So it's about 30 almost all around. Upekoyim mitachas l'sfaso, and there were knobs under the lips. You see these little protrusions. I don't know if you can see it. This is this artist's rendition. In the Machon HaMikdash, it's much more colorful and beautiful, but there's little ridges or prongs that come out. Sovevim also, Eser ba'amo makifin es hayam, saviv shnei turim habekoim yitzukam b'tzivkuoso. And okay, yeah, I should find it with this, that. Bekoim mitachas also. There's a difference of opinion as to exactly what this all means. Okay, some say that on the base there were these pekoyim, like little protrusions which you can open up and draw water from. As you said, some say it was like the oxen were underneath this, and the mouths of the oxen were the spouts. And some say no. Pekoyim means like little knobs. You can see the circular like knobs. And here's a calculation actually of the 30 almost. It works out basically by rounding off pi. Anyway, these pekoyim were underneath the lip, saviv all around. They were 10 amos, makifin es hayam saviv. 10 amos off the ground were these pekoyim, all around. Shnei turim, there were 2 rows. You can see here the artist putting 2 rows or 2 rows, whichever way it looked. Could have been in other ways it looked too. Okay, they were all poured as one piece. Omed al shtei asar bakar, was standing on these 12 oxen. Ponim safona. Shlosha ponim safona, 3 of the oxen faced north. Shlosha ponim yoma, 3 of the oxen pointed south. Ushlosha ponim negba, ponim yoma to the west. Ushlosha ponim negba, and 3 were facing the south. Ushlosha ponim mizracha, and 3 were facing the east. Vayam alehem milmala, and the bowl was on top of these oxen. V'chol achoreim boisa. Their hindquarters were not visible. They were underneath, facing inward, so that they were not visible. V'ovyo tefach usfaso kemase svas kos perach, and the thickness was a tefach. Usfaso, and the lip the thickness of the bowl was a tefach, which is basically 4 inches. Kemase svas kos. It looked like you ever see you know what a becha is? A wine kiddush cup.
Okay.
You see that little lip some of them have to go over, so it's easier to pour. There's a little lip all around the surface of the becha, of the kos. So that's what he's saying here. It's a tefach was the lip around this big gigantic bowl. Like kemase svas kos, just like you would make around a cup. Perach, shoshan, alpayim bas yochel. It could hold 2,000, excuse me? 2,000 saw of water. A mikvah holds 40. This held 2,000 saw. Gigantic. A big mikvah.
A mikvah is only 40?
A mikvah is 40 saw.
40 to be kosher.
Right. Oh, it can be bigger.
Yeah.
But it has to be a minimum of 40.
I read somewhere in one of the MIDRASH that a mikvah has 5,250 egg yolks.
Okay. Be ashamed to test that. All right, but anyway, 40 saw. Okay. I'm going to say, okay, the Yovi of Tefel is also Gemasis Vaskos, Perach, Shoshan, Alpayim Bas Yochel. And around, so here's the top of the bowl, and here's the lip that goes over it, and here is the flowers that went around the bowl. It was adorned with flowers. Everybody can see that on both. If anybody wants to take a closer look, they're free to ask me to pass it around here, like everybody can take a look at it. I'll pause here as you look at it. Now you see, but while this is being passed around, we finished talking about Shlomo's palace, and here we are back discussing various apparatus that went into the Beis Hamikdash. So here we go. We go from the Beis Hamikdash to the palace of the king, back to the Beis Hamikdash, and it substantiates what I've told you earlier, that Shlomo considered this all one large project. And the stability of the Beis Hamikdash and its continuity was dependent on the stability of the king, of the government, the stability of the Malchus. When there was fracticide, when they killed each other, when they disrupted the normal flow of the rule, the Beis Hamikdash wobbled, and ultimately it was destroyed. Okay, when you get that back, I will. Did everybody on this side see it?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Now we're on Pasuk Chav Zayin. Vayasas hamachonos. These are the setters. Machon, you know, is a machine in modern Hebrew. So what they're talking about here is Eser Nechoshes. They made 10 of these, let's call it portable wagons that would transport these little bowls around the inside the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, the Azara, in order for the Kohanim to have the ability to wash their hands and feet, and they moved it inside if they needed it inside. Arba amos orach hamachon ha'echas. There was 4 amos. 4 amos is 6 feet. Hamachon ha'echas. This is a very rudimentary picture of it.
What pasuk are you up to?
I am up to Pasuk Chav Zayin. 27.
27.
He made 10 of these wagons. It's the English translation called setters. I guess because the set in them is Arba Ba'ama Orach Hamachono Echas. Each, the length of each of these wagons, or we want to call it, or setters, was 4 amos long. Ba'arba Amma Rachba, it was a square 4 by 4. Ushlosh Amma Komoso, and 3 amos high. B'zeh Maseh HaMachona. And this is how they made this machona. It wasn't just like this, bold like this. There was going to be a lot of artwork involved in this. Okay, and this is how they made the setters, or the wagons. Mizgaros lahem, they had sides. The wagons had 4 sides. Umizgaros bein hashlavim, between the ledges of the wheels, they had, the walls. The walls went all the way down to, I guess, the axles here. And on these things, they had lions. The first row of this wall of the side of the wagons, let's call them, it was a row of lions carved into the side. Okay? Between the wheels, there were this one line of lions, bakar, and then one line of cattle, and then ukruvim, bakar ukruvim, and then they had like the picture of the cherubs. So they had 1 row of lions, 1 row of oxen, and 1 row of the cherubs carved into the side of the wagon. V'kein mimal u'mitachas la'aroyas v'laboka v'lulos maseh morod. Then what they did is, underneath it, they had some kind of web work. Like it looked like woven, a band of like woven copper carved into the sides of the setters, the wagons.
It's amazing how they did these things.
Yeah, amazing. Well, this is this Hiram, who they brought down from Sidon, who was this expert in copper work. He was the artisan that either supervised or did all of this work. I'm sure he supervised it. I'm sure he didn't do it all himself. Here's sort of a look at the completed wagon. Whereas over here, the first picture I showed you was of the raw wagon here. It ended up looking something like this. That bottom picture here. Okay. All right.
And on that was a basin for washing?
Yes. Well, we'll get to that. V'arba ufane nechoshes, and they had 4 wheels of copper, the wheels. L'mochona hoachas, each one had 4 wheels. V'sarne nechoshes, and tablets of copper. V'arba pamosav kesefos lahem. And they had what they called undersetters. See if they can see that here. You don't really see that here. They don't show a picture of that. Okay, but they had things that would supported it. It just didn't hang on these 4 wheels. There was something underneath it that would hold it, because the bowls that were going to be placed in it and the water that's going to fill up those bowls was quite heavy. So they had what the English translation will tell you was undersetters in order to hold it up. And they had 4 of wheels of copper for each wagon, and mesarne and tablets of nechoshes. They had these tablets on the sides. V'arba pamosav, and they had 4 bells, kesefos lahem. They had some kind of, these are the undersetters. They showed it separately, but underneath this, holding it up all from all sides, were these sort of undersetters, as they called it. Okay. L'tachas lakiyar, underneath the kiyar hakesefos yutzokos, it was all poured me'aver ish lulos. From one side, it was poured from pure copper, and in order to give it strength, it was one piece. Upiyo mi beis torres, ulamala ba'ama upiyo ogol, mase kein amo v'chatzi ha'ama, bigam al piyo miklaos u'mizgoreseim merubaos lo agulos. And on top, I don't know if you can see it, there was this, it filled in other words, it wasn't hollow, it wasn't like like a pickup truck, empty. It had a roof, so to speak, and the roof sort of came from all sides to peak, and in the middle of the roof was a round area, I guess a depression of round, and it's where they set the bowl into it, and they filled the bowl up with water. Here's what it looks like, according to this artist. I guess they had to support it so it didn't wobble, or so they supported it on its sides, and they had this bowl on the top of it. Anybody wants to see, that's sort of the final product look.
What's the purpose of having it mobile?
So that they can move it around to where the Kohanim needed it. This is very hard, the way they try to describe something in words that you don't have a picture for.
And where did the design come from?
Someone's head. The artist. What's his name? Hiram. The artist who designed this, he was the artist. Why he picked lions, why he picked bears, why he picked cherubs. This is all Kabbalistic thing, the Kabbalistic interpretations to these various things. Lions denote strength, in a sense, or actually lions denote bravery, gvura. The oxen denote strength. The cherubs denote spirituality. And there's a blend of these things, because that's really what life is all about. Blending these kind of qualities and characteristics.
I had read though that lions were not the noble or brave animal. They eat mostly dead animals, and
the lion is considered the king of the animals. Whether or not that translates into actuality in nature, I have no idea. I never really studied the lions. You want to see that?
Who puts those around? I mean,
who puts this out?
no, who push the cart around?
Kohanim.
Kohanim pushed it for Kohanim?
Right. Yes, sure.
Okay, so there must have been a handle on it, so also.
Yeah, there must have
You see
been
a
something
handle?
that you could move it by. Or you could probably just grab a hold of the side and move it. I don't know exactly. Question was, do the wheels turn? I don't know about that either.
we hope.
Yeah. Be hard to just go like this and then like that and like this and keep pushing it around. It'd be a little hard. Okay. 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 V'arba ha'ofanem le'mitachas la'mizgaros, and the wheels were by the undersetters. V'doso ha'ofanim ba'machona, and there were axles that, you know, joined the two wheels on each side. V'koma sa'ofan ho'echad arama v'chatzi ho'ama, and each wheel was 1.5 amos, which is, you know, like 2 feet, a little bit more, maybe a little bit more than 2 feet. And the way the wheels were made, like any other chariot wheels, you know, wheels that were in chariots. The axles, the brackets, the rims, the spokes, everything was made out of pure poured copper or brass. V'arba kesefos el arba pinos, and there were 4 undersetters by the 4 corners. Hamachona ho'echas min hamachona kesefeho. And these undersetters went to bolster underneath the machona, the machine or the wagon, and they supported the weight of the wagon. You know what went on top. And on the very peak of the wagon, there was this round area so that they could fit the bowl, or whatever you want to call that, the receptacle, into that area. Okay, and it was a chatzi ha'ama, a half a so if it's about 9 inches high. Ogol Soviv, Rosh HaMachona, Yidoseha, O Miskaroseha Mimena. And around the head of the Machona, there were ledges and there were borders in order to hold it in place. So there was this little rim at the bottom that held the bowl in place. You want to take a quick look at that? There was this rim at the bottom of the upper, this little bowl. You see that rim over there? I don't know if you can see it. And the bowl fit in and it protected it from, you know, spilling over.
So was this designer considered a prophet that he's getting messages?
No.
Or?
Oh, did he get messages? You ever talk to a real artist? An artist believes that everything that he gets is inspired. When an artist paints a picture, especially a religious artist who's, you know, painting religious themes, they will tell you that they had an inspiration. There was some spark that helped them. You know, whether it's not prophecy, whether it's Ruach HaKodesh, well, Ruach HaKodesh can be interpreted as divine inspiration. So there is this issue, or this characteristic of divine inspiration that goes into every piece of art. The same thing can be said about every poet. Every poet feels that he is divinely inspired by his poetry. An artist feels that way. A scholar who comes up with an innovative approach to Torah or to anything. Math, science, they will think sometimes that it just jumps into their head like a divine inspiration, that just like a blitz out of nowhere, this thought comes into their mind. So the answer simply is yes, there was divine inspiration. It was not prophecy. Okay, where's the map? Pasuk 36. Okay, Vayifatach al haluchos yidoseha v'al umiskoroseha keruvim arayos v'timeros k'mase ish lulo saviv. And all around there were these lions and oxen and cherubs and this web work all around the wagon, and it was carved into the wagon. Because those asa es eser hamachonos, each one of these setters or wagons, there were 10, and each one was made the same way. Mutzak echad, one from one piece, mida achas, the same measurement, each one. Ketzev echad l'kulana, there was one size to all 10. They were duplicates, 10 duplicate little wagons. And they made 10 bowls to fit into the 10 wagons. Arboim bas yochil. Each of these, this doesn't show it properly, but each one of these bowls, you want to call it, that was on top of the wagons could hold 40 saw. Each one of them was like the size of a mikveh. So this picture, I think, is quite undersized for that depiction. I would think that these bowls were much wider than what's shown here. I can't imagine they could fit 40 saw in a bowl that looked like that. Anyway, they could hold 40 saw. Arba ba'amo hakiyor ho'echad. Oh, tells you right here. They were 4 cubits. Kiyor echad al mahamachona. One bowl, one type of bowl, same size on all of the 10 wagons. Arba ba'amo hakiyar is telling you that it was 6 feet across from lip to lip, and I don't think that shows it properly, but okay. Vayiten es hamachonos, and where did they place these wagons? Chomesh al kesef habayis miyamin, 5 on one side of the house of the sanctuary. Now chomesh al kesef habayis has mismalo, and 5 on the left side of the heichal. Be'ez hayom nosan mikesef habayis hayemonis, and the huge one on the 12 oxen was put outside of the entranceway to the Beis Hamikdash, on the right side, Kedma, facing east, Mimul Negev, and from east to south, on the southeast corner of the entranceway to the Beis Hamikdash.
So they weren't all for the Kohanim; they were also for the.
No. People didn't go there.
The one that was outside wasn't for people that were going.
Here they're showing the wagons: 5 on this side, 5 on that side. What they forgot to show is the big one. Maybe it's on the next page. Nope.
So the animals must be to show physical strength, would you think?
Well, the Vilna Gaon says that the animals were to reflect the 12 constellations. Some say they were to reflect the 12 tribes. This is all Kabbalistic kind of, things.
I never heard of it.
Hagroa ba'aderes Eliyahu kosav sheyud beis habekorim mechuvanim keneged yud beis hamazolos. The Vilna Gaon in his Sefer Aderet Eliyahu says that the 12 oxen were corresponded to the 12 constellations, and he expands on that ba'arucha in a long dissertation. So the author of this book doesn't mention any other theory, but I've seen that it's also to reflect the 12 tribes. Okay. Now, so these are the big apparatuses the big sea, the 10 wagons. Now we're on Pasuk Mem. Vayas Hiram es hakiros, and Hiram made these basins, ves hayoim, and shovels to carry the coals to the ketores. Ves hamizrakos, and the lavers. That was like a little. Next week I'll bring you the pictures from Machon HaMikdash. It was like a little pitcher with a handle in which the Kohanim could carry the water that was the libations of the water and the wine and even some of the blood that they would use for the service in the temple. And Hiram finished all of the work that he was assigned to do by the king, King Shlomo, in the house of God.
Why did they repeat the whole, repeating all the things?
Right, now they're going to repeat it all.
Why are they repeating?
So Mepharshim say that the reason it's repeated is to tell you that when you get a charge to do something, you get a job to do. And this job took years, and it didn't just happen in one day, it's not a month, years. You need to be prepared to account for everything you did. Now imagine there's some precious metals here. There's copper, which was precious, semi-precious. There was also gold that was used to inlay things, and so you would think, okay, he's on the job. No, they had to account for all of the material that they received from the king, and show that they invested it or they put it into the objects that they, or the art, or the whatever it is that they made. Amudim Shnayim, 2 columns, gulos with their the crowns around them, gulos hakoteres, the crowns around them, ashal rosh amudim, which were on the crowns of the heads, the tops of the amudim, shtoyim 2, Usvachos, and the netting, the network, the crisscross lattice work, Shtayim Lechasus, the Shtei Gulos HaKetoras, Asher Rosh Amudim, which went around and covered beneath the crowns, on the top of the columns. There's Harimonim, Arba Meos, and the 400 little, Rimonim. The Shtei Hasvachos, which went around on top of the lattice work, Shtei Turim, Shel Rimonim, Lasvacho Echos, 2 rows of these little pomegranates around each of these 15 feet, 15 amos circumference. And the wagons, the 10 of them, and the bowls that went on top of them, and the great sea, the big one, and the oxen, there was a lot of copper that went into all of these things. It was a massive project. It took years. V'es hasiros, and the pots, v'es hayoim, and the shovels, v'es hamizrakos, and the lavers, v'es kol hakelim ha'ela, and all of these utensils, asher also hiram lamelech shlomo beis Hashem, the choshes memorat, was polished bright brass. The brass, when it's polished, has a slightly reddish tinge, or it looks like gold. It's polished brass looks like gold. But okay, now that gets to the question of how in the world did this Hiram make a 20 amos high column, 15 amos circumference? How did he make such a massive column? How did he do this? So the Tanakh tells us here, Bakikar HaYarden, they went down to the banks on the plains of the Jordan. Bikat HaYarden, the valley by the Jordan River. Yitzakim, that's where they were poured. They dug a hole in the earth, 20 amos deep. They smoothed it around, probably with some kind of sid, what's sid? Mud, but sid is lime. They limed it around, and then they poured the molten copper into it. That was the mold. The mold was inside the ground. B'ma'avei ha'adama, in the thick clay of the earth, Bein Sukkot and Bein Sartan, between a place called Sukkot and a place called Sartan, they dug into the earth and they made these huge pits. They lined them with sid, and then they poured the copper into it, and eventually they dug it out and somehow they lifted it. Vayanach Shlomo's kol hakelim mirov ma'od ma'od, lo nechkar mishkal hanachoshes. And Shlomo, contrary to what Hiram wanted to do, Hiram wanted to account for everything. Shlomo let him have whatever that was necessary, and he did not make a hakira, he did not make an inquiry as to the actual weight of all the copper that went into all of these various implements. This gets to an interesting thing. This translates down to the halacha. When you pick a gabbai tzedakah, when a congregation or a community picks a gabbai tzedakah, does the gabbai tzedakah have to account for all the monies that he collects or that are donated to him and he distributes? So we generally say, we see the gabbai tzedakah has to be trustworthy and honest. Ki be'emuna hemosim, they do what they do is a matter of trust and faith in Hashem, and they don't have to account. So here we have Hiram, the Mefarshim want to understand, Hiram is very concerned about questions of his integrity. Not that he was a dishonest person, but there's always these murmurings that arise, behind the scenes. So he wanted to account, but Shlomo said you don't have to account. Lo nechkar mishkal hanachoshes. And by the way, when a person says he's willing to account and he wants to account, usually there's no panky-panky, because he wouldn't be insisting on an accounting if he himself knew that he, dipped into the till. So that's another indication that he is an honest and straightforward person. Vayash Shlomo's kol hakelim, Shlomo made it all, and he did not, lo nechkar mishkal hanachoshes. He did not investigate the weight of the copper. Vayash Shlomo's kol hakelim asher beis Hashem. And Shlomo made all of the utensils that were necessary for the temple, for the house of God. Es mizbach hazahav, the altar of gold. V'es hashulchan, and the table that held the lechem hapanim, the showbread. Asher olav lechem hapanim zahav. He made it out of gold. And here's what he does. In the Mishkan there was one menorah that Moshe Rabbeinu had a difficulty making because he couldn't figure out all of the bells and the whistles and all the things that went into the menorah, how to make it out of one piece, miksha echad, from one solid piece. So there was one menorah, Hashem showed him, kozos, this is the way you do it. But Shlomo made 10 menorahs. Pasuk mem tes. V'es ha-menoros chomesh miyamin, he made 5. Let's call it menorot, menorot, on the right side in the inside of the courtyard. B'chomesh mismol, and 5 on the left side. Lifnei hadavir, before the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Zahav sagor, pure gold. V'haperach v'haneres v'melkochayim zahav, and the flowers and the candle holder, where the light was, where the wicks went, and the tongues that were used to set the wicks were zahav, were made out of gold. V'hasipot, and the wells where the oil was put in. V'hamizamros, v'hamizrakos, and the musical instruments, and the lavers, v'hakapos, and the spoons, v'hamachtos, and the pans. Zahav sagor, made out of pure gold. V'haposos, v'hadalsos, and the hinges for the doors of the bayis hapnimi, of the inner door that led to the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, l'dalsei habayis laheichal so'ev, and the doors that one entered into to enter into the chamber, not the Holy of Holies, but the chamber itself of the Beis HaMikdash, all gold. Vatishlam kol hamalocha, and all of this work that we have been studying and learning about, Asher Asa Melech Shlomo Beis Hashem, that Shlomo did for the temple, Vayove Shlomo es kodshe David Oviv es hakesef v'hasazov es hakelim nosam ba'otzos beis Hashem. This last pasuk is extremely interesting. First of all, again, to support my theory that Shlomo viewed all of this as one big project, not two separate projects, meaning not the temple and his palace as two projects, but they were interwoven as one integrated project. It says, Vatishlam kol hamalacha. All the work was finished, because the next pasuk is going to say, then Shlomo convened the nation to dedicate the temple. So first it tells us, Vatishlam kol hamalacha, sh'rasa melech Shlomo beis Hashem. Shlomo finished all of the work that he did in order to establish the temple. Well, 2 parakim ago he finished all the temple. Okay. Anyway, he did everything. Vayavai Shlomo's kachi David Aviv, and Shlomo brought all that David, his father, had set aside, the things that he sanctified and set aside for the construction of the temple. As HaKesev, the silver, V'es HaZahav, and the gold, V'es HaKelim, and all the utensils that David prepared. Nosan ba'otzros beis Hashem. He put them in the treasure houses, the storage treasure houses of the temple. There's a difference of opinion here as to what did he do. Some say he used the material that David accumulated and set aside for him to build the Beis HaMikdash, and whatever was left over, he then put in the treasury. And some say no. Shlomo did not use anything that his father David set aside for the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Why? Because David acquired all that gold and silver in war. And Shlomo did not want to use the spoils and the booty of war in the construction of the temple, because he's going to invite all of the nations, the surrounding nations, to come and pray in the temple. And we didn't want people to walk through the temple and say, oh, here's my gold, and there's my father's gold, and oh, he stole this.
Where did he get the gold in the
He was a wealthy person. It took him 20 years to build this building project. During this period of 20 years, he accumulated a tremendous amount of wealth. He had a fleet, which we will learn about, or we actually did touch on it briefly. He had a fleet. He had people coming and paying tribute to him. He had people from all walks of life who, when he married their daughters, they gave him, what do they call it, dowries. He had a lot of money, and he was so successful in whatever he did, in trade, in business, in horses, whatever he dealt with. He became quite wealthy, and he used all that wealth, plus probably people contributed. There must have been a wall of plaques somewhere.
But there also was a very big expense he had. We went into all of his expenses.
Right. We did. He did. But he was able to do it, according to those Mefarshim, from dipping into his own pocket from the public coffers, the treasury of his Malchus. So there's a difference of opinion. Anyway, Perek Ches, we will just read the first pasuk, because this again supports what I said before, that he viewed all this as one big project. Because after we discussed and we learned about all of the construction of the Beis HaMikdash, all of the construction of the apparatuses and the utensils that went into the Beis HaMikdash, and after we learned about the palace and all of the hallways, the hall of justice, the hall of the throne, the forest that he created inside of his own palace, after we finish all this, Az Yakil Shlomo Ziknei Yisrael. Then Shlomo gathers all the elders of Israel, as Kol Roshei Hamatos, all of the heads of the tribes, Nesiei Ha'avos, all of the princes of the clans, Livnei Yisrael, of the nation of Israel, El HaMelech Shlomo Yerushalayim, he gathered them all to the king to Jerusalem, Lahalos es Aron Baris Hashem Me'ir David Hitzion, to bring the holy ark from the city of David, where David had left the holy ark and built a mizbeach by it. He brought that up and ensconced it into the Beis HaMikdash and dedicates the Beis HaMikdash. So now you see, at least I think we see, that he viewed all this as one project, and he did not dedicate the Beis HaMikdash when it was sort of finished. He waited until the entire construction project was completed, because as I submitted before, He did not want to gather the people to a construction site. He wanted to gather them to a beautiful, magnificent city, finished in all, with all the accoutrements that were necessary. The mikvaot, the rooms for them to sleep, the rooms for the cattle to be housed before they were sacrificed, the rooms for all of the treasure house of the Beis Hamikdash. Everything was built and finished because he didn't want to do a half-complete job and bring everybody there and say, yeah, you know what, come back when I finish. No, this is it. It's not easy, today, you can take a car, drive down to Jerusalem if you live in Haifa. But if, when you want to gather a whole nation to a central place, it's not an easy undertaking. And it doesn't happen overnight. There had to be announcements sent maybe months in advance until to gather all the people, set a date and say everybody come down by then to dedicate the Beis Hamikdash.
Why was it important to consider it as one project?
Because it's one beautiful city. It's not, and again, the stability of the Beis Hamikdash is dependent on the stability of the government. When there's fighting among who should be the next king, when there's all kinds of agitation and there's all kinds of undercurrents simmering under the surface, there's no peace in Israel in a sense, then the Beis Hamikdash is threatened. It's jeopardized. It wobbles. I know that's a metaphor. It's not really wobbling. It means it's shaking because it needs a strong foundation of unity, of centrality, of everybody pulling for the same thing, and therefore he waited until everything was totally in sync and done.
This was the first temple.
Excuse me?
This is the first temple?
Yeah.
First temple. There is no description of the building of the second temple in our holy texts. The second temple is described by Josephus. Excuse me?
It was Hadrian.
Well, Hadrian did it. No, not Hadrian. Hortus. Okay, Hortus did it. Oh no, 1 second. Hadrian, yeah. Well, I don't remember now. There's Hadrian, the Roman emperor, and there's Hortus, the Jewish, ruler of the land. Hortus was actually an Edomite convert who married into the family of the Hasmoneans and was paranoid eventually, killed them all, and made him, and took over to rule. But anyway,
So it's no better than Hadrian.
Hortus is called in Jewish literature Hortus HaRasha, the evil, wicked maniacal. He's a maniac. He killed his own children. He thought they were plotting against him. He had his own wife killed, his own children killed. He was like a nut. He was a nutcase. But in I guess in Western culture, he's called Herod the Great. Herod. It's not Hadrian. It's Herod. Herod the Great, because he was a great builder. He built Masada. He built what's the little Masada called? Herodian. He rebuilt the temple in a sense. He beautified the city of Jerusalem, and he's called Herod the Great because he was a one-master great builder. In Jewish literature, that doesn't amount to much because he was a murderer, and therefore we call him Herod or Hortus HaRasha, the evil one. Different perspective than he has in Western historical record. Okay. We will stop here.